Welcome to Happiness on Tap, where we fill your cup with inspiration, resilience, and real life tools to create your best life. I'm your host, Leanne Herron, and today's episode is one that every helper, healer, and heart centered professional needs to hear. I am joined by the brilliant Dr. Jenny Hughes, licensed clinical psychologist, trauma expert, and founder of the Brave Trauma Therapist Collective. Dr. Jenny helps healers and helpers manage the weight of vicarious trauma and tap into vicarious resilience, finding joy and humanity in the work again. She is the author of the PTSD Recovery Workbook and Triggers to Glimmers, a vicarious resilience journal and workbook. And she specializes in practices like brain spotting, EMDR, and cognitive processing therapy. Dr. Jenny is on a mission to help trauma therapists reconnect to their humanity, prevent burnout, and find joy in the work again. Stick around for a powerful conversation on the hidden costs and surprising gifts of helping others heal. Dr. Jenny, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Leanne. I'm really excited.
I'm excited for this conversation. So let's get started right away. What first drew you to this work and made you passionate about helping trauma therapists specifically?
Well, this is a common question that therapists get asked, right? Why did you become a therapist? And for me and for a lot of therapists out there, a lot of it comes down to me search. And so, I was drawn into the field of psychology because I really wanted to understand kind of some of my own past experiences and early childhood experiences. And I wanted to help kids and teenagers who had been through similar things. That I didn't know that I was going to specialize in trauma at the time. I was one of those odd undergrad students who immediately declared my major the second that I started college because I knew I wanted to go into psychology. But I didn't know that I was going to be a trauma therapist or a trauma psychologist. Our careers take us in so many different places that we never expect. And yet it makes so much sense now that I am a trauma specialist. I initially started working with kids and adolescents who had been experiencing child abuse and neglect. And that has since taken me to now primarily serving adult clients in my practice and supervising work with families and kids for interns that I supervise. The supporting and caring for other trauma therapists was really something that happened and all came full circle during the pandemic. I had for a long time been doing a lot of work around teaching healthcare professionals and helpers and healers about vicarious trauma. And during the pandemic, I was asked to create a program for a lot of the frontline workers here in Houston. And I was, of course, honored to do that. And it also, for the first time, for some reason, led me to ask the question, like, okay, but who's taking care of the therapists that are doing all of this work? And so from there, the Brave Trauma Therapist Collective was born. That's the short version of the story. And, kind of very similar to when I first started working with kids and families, being able to support people kind of at the source, right? So whether it's early intervention for kids and families or supporting our therapists who are doing the work to care for their communities, really intervening at the source means that we're going to have an even bigger impact. So it's not just one to one, but it's one to many through really creative and innovative ways.
And I absolutely love that, thinking about the pandemic and how that was and how first responders, doctors, nurses, everyone was right there and they were burning out, they were overworked, and I don't ever remember hearing about anyone who was there for them. And so knowing that this is what you do, this is kind of where it came from and grew from, just really makes it so much more impactful and just so amazing and so heartwarming to
Hmm.
hear that that's where it came from and that's who you're helping. And I love that.
Thank you.
So you mentioned vicarious trauma, and you often talk about both vicarious trauma and vicarious resilience. For those new to those terms, How do you define them?
Yeah, I'm so glad that we're talking about the definitions of these things really early on. So, vicarious trauma is a term that can be thrown around and misused in a lot of different ways. So, vicarious trauma is something that only happens to people who are in helping or caregiving roles. And yet, it can be thrown around to kind of mean like, oh, I vicariously experienced this terrible thing. But that's not at all what vicarious trauma is. So, vicarious trauma happens when you are in a helping and healing role. You're naturally going to be experiencing empathy for the person that you are helping, the person that you're serving. And through that empathic engagement and the relationship that you have with that person, even if it's just a one off interaction, that their stress, their trauma is going to be absorbed in your system. And over time, our vicarious trauma sponge can get really, really full. And if we do not have the opportunity to wring out that sponge, whether it's through our own regulation activities, community, things like that, vicarious trauma can turn into compassion fatigue, where again, specific to people in helping and healing roles, they just feel like they have nothing left to give. Their cup is empty, both professionally and personally, oftentimes. If they don't have the opportunity to address, to manage the compassion fatigue, that can turn into secondary traumatic stress. Secondary traumatic stress can be experienced by anyone. That is the whole like, "Oh, I was negatively affected by this terrible thing I learned about," not vicarious trauma. Secondary traumatic stress can happen to anyone. When we're talking about helping professionals, when they develop secondary traumatic stress, it is because of and about the work that they're doing. And so with secondary traumatic stress, a lot of the symptoms are very similar to PTSD. So let's say if I had secondary traumatic stress right now, I can't stop thinking about the terrible things that my clients are telling me. I'm having nightmares about their traumas. I'm feeling hypervigilant and on edge because of the traumas they are telling me, not because of anything that I've ever experienced, but because of the things I'm hearing. And then from there, if we don't address the secondary traumatic stress, then it's burnout. And burnout is kind of the bottom of the barrel. You just are so done. You jump ship to save yourself because it feels like there's no other way to kind of climb back out of this process. And this is actually a model that I've developed called the trauma therapist trauma response, or it can just be called the provider trauma response. It's also backed by the literature on vicarious trauma, compassion fatigue, secondary traumatic stress, and burnout. And even though I present it in kind of this linear format, just like in psychology, nothing is linear. There can be lots of back and forth. You can be kind of anywhere along that continuum at any moment. And it's not unidirectional. You can always move back. You can always kind of come back up to the top. And vicarious trauma is a normal thing. It just is going to happen. And it doesn't have to kind of proceed into compassion fatigue, secondary traumatic stress, and burnout, but it often does. Vicarious resilience, on the other hand, is a major protective factor for this process from moving forward. And it's the other side of the coin with vicarious trauma. So, vicarious resilience is when through that empathic engagement, we're soaking up all the beautiful stuff. My vicarious resilience workbook is called Triggers to Glimmers because instead of soaking up all the triggers, we are also soaking up the glimmers and the beautiful things that happen in our work as helpers and healers. And these are not just the big things. It's not just the big goals or the big accomplishments that our clients reach, but all the tiny little human moments that we get to experience together. And so we can't have one without the other. You can't just have vicarious resilience. You have to also, your system has to be open to vicarious trauma because they're both experienced through empathic engagement. But they balance each other out in a lot of ways. And we can really work to enhance vicarious resilience so that it is leading, so that it is forward in our experiences as helpers.
Thank you for sharing those 3 very powerful definitions. I think a lot of people are going to relate to that who are helpers and healers, and I also like how you explained that you can't have one without the other, and that reminds, you know, us as helpers and healers when we are working just to celebrate our wins and how
Mm.
powerful that is to keep us from those negative thoughts and so when we can do that from our clients, from the work that we're doing, that we remember to celebrate their wins and our wins and the like you said, the beautiful moments, it's
Yeah,
so
that's a big thing
powerful.
that we do in the Brave Trauma Therapist Collective is we share together our moments of vicarious resilience throughout the week. And, we're of course doing it in a de identified way. We're not sharing any personal information about our clients, but sharing those beautiful glimmers, those beautiful moments that we really truly get to experience every single day as trauma therapists. And anyone in a helping role has the capacity, has the access to experience vicarious resilience every single day if we know how to identify it, if we know how to notice it, install it in our body, and then enhance it by telling other people about it, just like you were intuiting.
Yeah, and it makes me think again when we do that. Like it's really hard in this world and the times that we're having right now to get sucked into the negativity that's going on. And when you're trying to stay in that happiness, then you have guilt that you shouldn't be happy right now. You should be identifying with the suffering of the world or, whatever. But to know that we can have the power to into that happiness, those little moments, and not feel guilty about it. Just know that, it is okay to still have happiness even when there's sadness. We have to have that
Yeah.
light and that dark to be balanced individuals. Can you share a real life example of vicarious trauma showing up in a therapist or a helper's life?
Yeah, I mean it happens all the time. I hear about it every single day. Some of the most common things that I hear that trauma therapists tell me about whether they're in Brave or not is, not being able to stop thinking about their work, feeling like it's really heavy, but even in a more tangible way, feeling so tired, feeling so drained, feeling like, their work is just this heavy knapsack on their back that they can't get rid of. Also, feeling really alone and isolated when we do not have other trauma therapists and in any helping profession, other colleagues around us to be able to talk about our work, the good, the bad, and the ugly. It can be very lonely, whether we're in private practice or we're working in an organization. And so that feeling really lonely can start to really kind of even magnify some of the other things that are going on. Vicarious trauma can also show up in our relationships. So perhaps dreading certain clients or our work overall. Also, lots of irritability, feeling like everyone's just pissing you off all the time, not just your clients, but like everyone in your life. That's a big one for me. And, I mean, with vicarious trauma, it's affecting our brain, our body, our relationships, and our job, and our spirituality as well. And so and I do want to kind of be aware that I'm using this term vicarious trauma very broadly because a lot of those things that I'm describing can also be part of compassion fatigue, secondary traumatic stress, and even burnout. And, with normalizing vicarious trauma, that it's a normal thing, all of those can occur without it negatively impacting a helper or healer's life or experience when we have ways to wring out that vicarious trauma sponge so that it's not getting overly full.
Yeah, that's great information and insight in how it shows up because I think for those of us who aren't familiar with the term, and I wasn't before talking to you, even as a coach, you don't think about how much you are carrying on. And so I know that I'm sure you're going to talk about some tips and things that you recommend to help us be balanced and grounded and things that we can do to protect our energy in the work that we do. And so I want to talk about your workbook because I'm sure it's going to go through a lot of those things. So your workbook Triggers to Glimmers helps therapists lean into resilience. What inspired you to create it and how is it meant to be used?
Well, I was inspired to create it because first and foremost, vicarious resilience is even lesser known than vicarious trauma. So, especially for therapists and mental health professionals, vicarious trauma is a pretty well-known term. It's something that we're taught about very early on in our careers, but we're taught that it's this boogeyman under the bed that we have to avoid. Like you don't ever want to experience vicarious trauma. It's just the worst thing in the world. And which is not true because it's going to happen to everyone. It's a normal experience. But vicarious resilience is something that very few people know about. More are learning about it because I've made it my mission to share the the news. It was something that was discovered on accident by researchers in the early 2000s who were doing qualitative research on trauma therapists who were treating survivors of torture in Latin America. And they were interviewing these trauma therapists, and their research was about secondary traumatic stress, compassion fatigue, all of that stuff. And they found that these trauma therapists, instead of saying how terrible their work was and how much they hated their jobs, were talking about how amazing their work was and what a positive impact their job as being a trauma therapist was having on them as humans and on their life. And so they coined this term vicarious resilience. And it just is something that I want everyone to know about. And there are very few resources out there. So it's not very well known. There's not a whole lot of resources on how do we then practically work with this concept of vicarious resilience. And so I created the workbook. It's a workbook and journal. So there are some pages where there's some kind of exercises and prompts. There's also a lot of blank pages to allow for space to be able to kind of sit with and explore vicarious resilience for oneself. And there's one exercise that I use over and over and over again throughout the book called my soft transitions exercise. And it's a really concrete way to start to get into the practice of noticing vicarious resilience and to really install it and enhance it. And so it's intended to be really quick, something done in like 2 to 3 minutes at the end of the day to help us transition our roles from being the clinician to being whoever else we are in our lives. And to first think about what are 1, 2, maybe 3 moments of vicarious resilience that we experience today, and to write that down. A lot of times we first notice vicarious resilience in our bodies. So, what are the moments when you felt the warm fuzzies, when you felt really open and expansive, when you teared up because you were just so proud of and happy of the work that your client was doing? From there, we go from the body kind of up into the head. And so thinking about getting cognitive, what are a couple things I have to do tomorrow, right? So it's some of this kind of weaving in and out of the brain and body, and then dropping back into the body through gratitude. And so ending with who are 1 or 2 people for whom I am grateful. And it's intentionally relational there because it is about thinking about the people that are in our lives for whom we have gratitude. And that could be a client, a colleague, a friend, a family member. And bonus points if you want to reach out and tell them how grateful you are for them or send them a little thank you note. But going through that process, identifying the vicarious resilience, noticing what it's like in your body, and then especially that part of the relational piece, that is a very powerful way to begin to notice vicarious resilience and then enhance it by connecting it with the people in our lives.
Oh, I love that. Because we can all think about gratitude. We should all be practicing, have a little gratitude practice. It really helps keep us in a positive mindset. I try to do it both in the morning when I wake up and in the evening before I go to bed. But doing it as a relational gratitude is very different from just saying, what are 3 good things that happened today, but actually very
Mhm.
specific to people who have impacted our lives, who, maybe we haven't thought about in a while, but all of a sudden something came up, something happened, and now we're thinking about that person. That is the best time to stop what you're doing and reach out to that person, whether it's through a text or pick up the phone and just call them and say, "Hey, you were on my mind. I just wanted to let you know I was thinking about you today." And that is something that I find myself doing all the time, just naturally. I will admit that I do more texting than phone calls, but I just want to let that person know that I'm thinking about them.
Mm.
Even with a friend, I just reached out on Halloween and just sent her a super quick happy Halloween thinking about you. So, there are little things in our day that make such huge impacts. So I love how you have included that in your workbook because I think
Mhm.
it's a wonderful way to help us continue to connect with
And
the
it can
people.
be scary and feel vulnerable to send that thank you note, but to be on the receiving end of that is so wonderful. I One of my members in Brave reached out and shared that they were doing the soft transitions exercise just the other day, and that I was on their thank you list, and they let me know. And to receive that, like, oh my gosh. It made my whole day, right? And so that's that relational piece of it. Yeah, it's scary to reach out, even just to say thank you. I'm thinking about you. I'm grateful for you. But it's so healing. It's so cleansing for our systems.
Yeah, and I was thinking when you were saying that, a lot of us struggle with that receiving end of it, we're not used to receiving. And so just to know that we're a part of that for another person, just to give them that gift in the day. So I think it's beautiful and very powerful. What are some of the most common misconceptions that therapists have about their own healing and self care?
Unfortunately, therapists have a lot of internalized misconceptions about their own healing and self care. Uh, and it starts in a lot of our training programs. We are explicitly and implicitly told that, we should be able to just, suck it up, buck up, pull ourselves up by our bootstraps, just deal with it, just leave work at work. That's a really toxic one that we're taught, like, oh, well, just leave work at work and then you'll be fine. But what happens when I think about my clients when I'm putting my kids to bed? Does that mean that I just failed as a therapist because I couldn't just leave it in my office and shut the door? Also, so if I am affected by it, I'm not a good enough therapist. I'm not cut out for this. I shouldn't be doing this work. We also, a lot of therapists, there are misconceptions about therapists in general that therapists, have it all together and then just have the most perfect self-care plans ever and then follow through with it. But we're human too. And we are totally imperfect and oftentimes feel a lot of shame that we are not always doing the same things that we are working on with our clients, that we're supporting them in doing. And so that can make a lot of barriers, a lot of jumps and hoops to go through in order for a therapist to say, okay, I guess maybe I am worthy of being cared for too. Maybe I can reach out. Maybe I can find a space where I can be received as a human and not judged and not attacked and not called unethical. And so it's a lot there's a lot of vulnerability involved there. There's a lot of working through and working with internalized stigma that we hold as therapists about our own needs and mental health. And it can be rough out there in a lot of therapist spaces, especially online. There's a lot of pointing fingers and calling of names of therapists to each other. And so it can, really kind of make that isolation even more intense.
Oh, I never would have realized that or thought about that. And I, was thinking too about like having imposter syndrome, like you said, like I'm not practicing what I preach. I'm not doing the things that I'm telling my clients they need to do and how that can affect you internally. But then
Mhm.
also having those outside negative sources that also make you feel bad
Mhm.
about that is sad. And I guess I hadn't thought about it or realized that that was happening in those spaces. And so I'm glad there are people like you out there providing space where you can come together and share those stories and share those struggles and share those wins. That is just so powerful. I'd love to talk about your Brave Trauma Therapist Collective and what makes this community so unique and why is community so vital in that trauma?
Yeah, well, I'm not going to sit here and say that Brave is perfect because nothing and no one is perfect. And the Brave Trauma Therapist Collective is a unique and moderated space for therapists. A lot of, especially online therapist spaces, are not appropriately or adequately moderated. And so, even if there is a container, even if there is supposed structure and rules, there is not a whole lot of clarity around kind of how people are supposed to behave within those things and what will happen, if they break any of those rules. In Brave, we don't come at it from a rules first place, but our members also know that we are all in this together. We're not here to attack. We are not here to tear down. We are here to build up. And so it is a collective agreement that we are going to be approaching each other with curiosity, with compassion, instead of with criticism. So, in Brave, I intentionally wanted to build a community for trauma therapists because what we know from the literature is that across disciplines, across, professions, one of the primary predictors of burnout are, well, two are isolation and organizational factors. So feeling alone and then working within an organization where you are just not feeling supported. And that can be an organization of one if you're someone that's in private practice. And so being able to know that there is a community, a place where you can come and be received by other trauma therapists who are going to say, hey, I'm human too. Hey, me too. Then that can make a huge difference when it comes to the bottom of that trajectory of burnout, of being able to walk it back. And then no matter where you are on that trauma response, natural trauma response for providers and trauma therapists, to have a space where you can show up, where there's always going to be someone to receive you. We have 24/7 support in our community. We have lots of different kinds of live calls for consultation. We just had a self-care call today. We have training and education for with our guest experts. And so it's just a whole kind of in mental health, we have this term wraparound services where we're just kind of circling our clients and our families from every single side. And my hope is that, and I know that our brave members feel that too, that they know that we're wrapping our arms around them so that they are not having to be isolated and alone, so that they can, work within an organization of one or 100 and do the work that they love, care for the clients that they care for, and be human in the process.
Yeah. Wanna just quickly mention how you and I met, through a collaborative platform, through Synergy, and how the connections that I have made with other coaches or just with other individuals and professionals within that community and connecting with these kind of stories and these frustrations. And that's why I think this platform was put out there, was so that we can connect with each other and have those conversations. It doesn't necessarily mean that we're only connecting to support each other through promotions or through workshops, but just to say, I am just struggling with this. I may be a solo practitioner and I've never really collaborated with another person or even had conversations, but I struggle with marketing and I know I need to be doing it, but I don't really understand it. And I hear that a lot from, older therapists who've been doing this for 30, 40, 50
Mm.
years. And now they're faced with the technology of today and the things that are more necessary to continue to grow our businesses. But just to be able to have that connection,
Yeah.
somewhere that we can jump on a quick call and know that we're all out there to support each other, I think has just been something I've really appreciated about it. And that's, I've just been honored to get to know you through that platform. So it's been wonderful.
Yeah, our community spaces are so necessary, whether that be in our online space, in our IRL, or in real life. But we are relational creatures, we are relational animals. And we need connection with other people, even or perhaps especially when that's scary. Not in an unsafe way, but that kind of the fear, the difficulties with vulnerability and showing ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. I do miss having my women's circle, my in-person women's circle. Maybe it's something I need to reconsider virtually because I do miss having that connection with my group of ladies. I'll give that a thought again. So what advice would you give to a therapist or a healer who is starting to notice the signs of burnout but feels guilty stepping back?
So, just because you are noticing the signs of burnout, vicarious trauma, any of those things, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to step back. That might be part of it. But the most important thing to do is to name it, to call a thing, to, name the elephant in the room. Because once we do that, we discharge so much power that these experiences, that these real things happening in our brains and bodies have over us. Because once you can say, "Yep, there's my vicarious trauma, it's showing up," then you can do something about it. Once you say, "Shit, that's my burnout," then you can do something about it. But when we keep hiding, when we keep trying to pretend like it's not there and avoiding, it's just that little gremlin that keeps coming and chewing at our ankles and eating its way all the way up. And so naming it is absolutely the most important first thing to do. And naming it for yourself, perhaps naming it with and to someone else so that you're not alone in it. And then you can have some support, whether that be through a colleague or a loved one. And from there, you don't have to recreate the wheel. You don't have to do anything new. think about what are the ways that you really actually are taking care of your needs already. Did you brush your teeth today, right? Did you eat a meal today? Did you drink some water? It's okay if you didn't check all of those off, but start thinking about what am I already doing to take care of my brain and body? Give yourself credit for those things. Then, what are the things that I know work that maybe I haven't been doing lately that I perhaps want to revisit? So it's a muscle that I can and a muscle memory that I can reactivate instead of having to learn or try something new. And once those two things start to be in place, reevaluate, see how you're feeling, see what it's like to say I'm burnt out or I'm experiencing vicarious trauma. Does that still fit? Does that still ring true? If so, that's okay. You can start then maybe you're adding in some new things. But if they don't resonate anymore, then think about, what is it that how do I want to describe my experiences as a professional and as a human right now?
Thank you. Those are all great things, great suggestions so that people can recognize. I think that goes for everyone in general, not just trauma therapists
Mhm.
or other helpers and healers, is that awareness and being able to not only identify, but like you said, name it. Like, okay,
Mhm.
I'm having anxiety. Where is this anxiety coming from? It, uh, what can I do? What's available to me? Maybe what, like you said, what am I not doing? Or, just coming up with things that you can identify that you are taking care of yourself. Or maybe I should get up and go and get me a glass of water and take a few minutes to step outside. And I think those things, when you have that awareness, that is so powerful in healing, in our daily functioning as humans and people and how we show up in our day.
And, like they say in 12 step, keep it simple, stupid. We don't have to get super complex about these things. And yes, we can think about it as a tiered approach, right? So get back to basics and then add things in as you need to. In Brave, I have a framework that I use: name it, tame it, reframe it. So name your vicarious trauma, call a thing, tame it, do whatever you need to do to manage it and wring out that vicarious trauma sponge, and then reframe it, access the vicarious resilience. And just like you were saying, Leanne, we can modify that for people who are not helpers or healers too, right? Let's name what's going on. Let's do what we need to do to tame it. And then reframing it is just being open to the glimmers in our lives. We all get to experience glimmers.
Oh, I love that. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that extra piece of your workbook and the journey to help people. If you could leave trauma therapists and healers with one powerful reminder about resilience, what would that be?
Just be human. We as humans, I mean, we have to be resilient, right? When we look at that through a trauma and survival lens, that's how we've gotten this far in evolution, is because of resilience. We also have to acknowledge the way that the term resilience can be used against certain groups of people. Oh, you're so resilient that you made it through X, Y, and Z over and over again because society has been constantly discriminating against you. And at the same time, just being human, allowing your brain and body to do the things that it naturally knows how to do. We were designed to heal ourselves, to be able to overcome things. We do not ever have to do that alone, and yet we do have that capacity when we allow ourselves to be imperfect and to be human.
Thank you for that. Very important. We all need that to remember that as well. Where can people find you? I want to make sure to include great contact information for you in the show notes. So, where can people find you?
So the best place is my website, braveproviders.com. On all the social media platforms, Brave Providers. I'm mostly hanging out on Instagram right now. And for anyone listening who wants to check out my vicarious trauma tracker, you can go to braveproviders.com/VT tracker, as in vicarious trauma tracker. And it's a free resource that I have. It is a download and then also a mini course that I made to go along with it, where I walk you through exactly how to use the tracker. I talk even more about what is vicarious trauma. And then the tracker also includes a bit of a reflection section. And so, kind of walking through some of that and talking about next steps.
Oh, thank you for that free gift. I will make sure to include that. I will also include your YouTube channel. I really enjoy all your episodes on there. and everything you've got going on. I'll have your Instagram and TikTok, Facebook, all those places where people can find you.
Thank you.
This has been such an empowering and heart opening conversation. Jenny, you remind us that while trauma work carries a heavy weight, it can also spark some of the deepest forms of resilience and connection if we learn how to recognize and nurture it. If today's episode resonated with you, please subscribe, leave a review, share this with a friend or a colleague who supports others for a living. And remember that you don't have to carry the work alone. You can find more about Dr. Jenny Hughes, her book, and the Brave Trauma Therapists Collective in the show notes. Until next time, keep choosing resilience, keep choosing joy, and keep choosing your happiness. So, thank you again, Dr. Jenny, for being with us here today. It has been a pleasure to share what you do and how you help others in this world.
Thank you so much for having me.